Evening, friends, and welcome you to this another session with inimitable Mr. Suresh Lulla for another round of the Quality Fables chat with him. If you remember last time, we talked about him and he talked about his meeting with Dr. J.M. Juran, who is considered the father of quality. And also in his fable, he talked about how chronic problems in an organization get unnoticed, they have to be looked at, and they can make a huge impact on your balance sheet. So today, we once again start our chat with him, but I'll start with asking Mr. Lulla that besides Dr. J.M. Juran, I read that another great personality of the century or the world, I would say for us, the father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi, had made an impact on him. So I'd like to know as to what part of Gandhiji, how did he feel that he influenced Mr. Lulla before we get on to this chat for today, or the chat. So Suresh bhai.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for challenging me again. I've never been asked this question before. I've just assumed that I am influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. But since you asked me, I'll have to go a little further into the history, even before I was born. My father was a freedom fighter. And in the salt satyagraha, he was a miner and went to jail. He went to jail and was released after 9 months on the basis of good conduct. I guess those 9 months must have been a lot of reflection, a lot of internalization, such that he became a Gandhian. Now, our house was full of Mahatma Gandhi's photographs, albums. I just grew up with them. And then what struck me is an important quotation of Mahatma Gandhi, that the customer is the reason for your existence. Treat him with respect. Now, this was way ahead of its time. And to me, that became quality. Going further, I interacted with another Gandhian, Sri Ramakrishna Bajaj, who had started a consumer protection movement in the country. Now, it all reinforced things, and I started reading more about Mahatma Gandhi. And I think the one word that stays in my mind is being trustworthy. Are you trustworthy? And whatever goes into becoming trustworthy in terms of character and competencies, that is what is completely in my DNA now. So that's a short answer, but I think it took many years to come up with the short answer.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, you were also mentioning that Gandhiji appeared on the cover page of some of the quality magazines.
several international quality magazines have covered at some stage Mahatma Gandhi and this one quote that the customer is the reason for your existence. It was radical for quality practitioners to think that way. They always thought, they'll do it with some statistical analysis or a system and get by with it. But no, unless the customer votes for you with his money, you haven't delivered quality.
I totally agree. I think that sentence of his or the quotation from him is quoted so often, but is forgotten so much. And I think if that remains at the center of our work or business or organization, a lot of things will improve. So let's start with the next Fable chat today. You remember the last chat was with the data sons, and he had given a great example of the chronic absenteeism in that organization and how that impacted the balance sheet. And that was a great learning. So let's hear today what is up his sleeves today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, all of you know Dr. Agarwal, president of CAHO. I've known him for 3 years, but I feel I've known him a lifetime. His thinking, his quality values, etc. I think we are very aligned on that. And it's a pleasure knowing him. I'm also happy to remind you that in 2019, he was our Kimpro Platinum Standard, 2019, which means he's a statesman for quality. A statesman encouraging the total nation or anyone who comes in contact with him. Think quality. You rarely find that in healthcare. And we found Dr. Vijay Agarwal last year. So congratulations again on that.
Thank you, sir.
And your citation in front of me.
Thank you, sir. Let's go ahead.
Now, I'll set up my screen. What have I done again? Oh. Okay, so we are here today to chat about features and failures. What is the definition of quality? Quality is fitness for use. And that fitness for use comes from your product or service having the right features that the customer wants, and it is delivered free from deficiencies or failures. You can't focus only on failures and expect now the customer will be delighted with you. You have to be proactive in understanding customer needs and build quality into the design and your processes. So we're going to be talking about a situation that actually involves real people, and I'm sure all of you have been there to a bank. 3 decades ago, going to a bank was a completely different experience to what it is today. You needed a bank manager to take care of you. You needed to be friendly to the clerk. You had to stand in lines, etc. And it was the multinational banks that stood out in comparison to our Indian banks. This quality fable will demonstrate that the best of institutions nurture COPQ, cost of poor quality. Features and failures, a bank failure. Now, what are multinational banks known for, particularly 3 decades back? They were the dream job for everyone, whether you were doing an MBA or you were doing an engineering degree. What engineers were doing in banks, I don't know, but they wanted jobs in multinational banks. The infrastructure and the executives were excellent. The lowest designation was vice president. So you join from an IIT and you join straight as a vice president. Now, being a vice president, your salary also matched it. And so also the aura that was built around you for getting a job with a multinational bank. I was invited by one of these multinational banks to come and experience what is excellence. In those days, we were talking about ISO 9000 as quality. We were talking about quality control. It was more of a checking subject. So here I was being introduced to what is excellence. Excellence had just been defined by the Baldrige criteria. If you go through their scoring guidelines, you'll appreciate what excellence is. In the first quartile, they expect you to have a system. ISO 9000. In the healthcare space, JCI, NABH. In the next quartile, they expect you to do continual quality improvement on the processes of the system. In the next quartile, they expect you to look at the practices within a process and benchmark within your industry and externally. Why externally? Because almost 80% of the practices that drive any organization are common. Only 20% are proprietary. So you can focus on the common areas and do some cross-industry benchmarking. And finally, excellence meant your definition of customer had expanded. You had external customers, you had internal customers, you had society, and you had Mother Earth. Now, in this kind of a progression, 30 years back, I was invited to come and experience excellence. holders. The branch manager took me around, and one could see marble flooring, piped music, Hussein paintings all over, everything that represented luxury. Every executive had a personal computer. In those days, that was the state of the art. Personal computer at a desk, and you sat behind in your pinstripe suit and dark tie and were busy. So we came to one department. It was about 200 square feet and with a wall of about 3 feet high. There were 4 executives, each facing one of the walls, and their personal computer. They all looked very, very busy. So I asked a simple question. What do they do? And I was told that they print the monthly account statements for the account holders. So, what are the activities of this section? They print the monthly statement of account holders. So being a qualitist with a manufacturing background, I said, oh, they manufacture monthly statements, which surprised him. A process is a process. It has the input, it adds value, and there's an output. In this case, the output was a monthly statement. I asked the next question which a qualitist would ask. What is the failure rate for these monthly statements? And he looked at me, can't you see it's all computerized? How can we have failure rates? So I put on my Mahatma Gandhi cap and I said, oh, I see. Do any customers come back for a reconciliation? The response was hardly any. How many? And he said, perhaps 1 in 200. I put on my engineering cap and said, aha, that's a 0.5% failure rate. So what is the cost of this failure? It's minimal, 0.2, 0.5. I said, let's find out. So we sat together and over half a day, we looked at 4 executives and we looked at the types of failures that were possible in that department. The types of failures were about 6 and the executives were 4. So we did a tally. And it turned out that you need 99.5% right the first time work. You needed 2 persons. And the equivalent of 2 persons were busy correcting 0.5%. So what is the COPQ of this department? 50%. 50% of the budget of this department is dedicated to correcting things that the customer is complaining about have failed. 50% of the budget. And do remember, they're also sitting on marble flooring. They also have a Hussein painting. All these costs are over and above the 50% budget. With this simple example, the bank heard the alarm. So it looked for an opportunity to work on a quality improvement project. Now, being the first project, it needed high visibility. And you don't want to explain to people what improvements you've made. They must experience it. So, the first pilot project was done in the auto loans division, which was located in Chennai. What do we learn? COPQ is alive in every service process. In manufacturing, the customer receives an output from a process. The customer is blind to the process. The customer compares your product with competitive products and decides to purchase. In a service, it's more difficult because the customer is part of the process and there are multiple moments of truth. One failure and the total experience is condemned as bad quality. Service is tough. In a healthcare environment, it's even tougher because human life is at stake. Safety, the risk to be taken. One has to be almost perfect in every process. How do you create that culture of perfection? Ask the Japanese. Nobody is against quality. If you tell them you're doing bad quality, they will frown. The first step is start with housekeeping. Sensitize your people to detecting a problem. Next, look for accidents, safety. They will all want practices to be safe. Then you ask them to work on quality, they will happily do it. But you need to create a climate. Housekeeping, you detect. Safety, accidents, something failed, and so you had the accident, quality was bad. And finally, quality improvement. A low failure rate can disguise a high cost of poor quality. As you saw in the bank, they didn't bother about 0.5% failure rate. Cost of poor quality was 50% of the department. Now you put all the departments of the bank together, it's a huge number. You can do the same with a hospital. It's an opportunity. Do not feel guilty about talking about your COPQ. See it as an opportunity, halve it, double your profit, halve it again, once again, bottom line improves. problems for pilot projects should have high visibility. You don't want to tell the workers that we are doing quality work, etc., and they don't know what you're talking about. Last month, we spoke about absenteeism, garbage not being collected, illness. When things improve, the workers see it. You don't have to go and convince them that you've done improvements. They know they have improvements. Quality has two arms. The product, service, features, the reason customers come to you and vote for you, and freedom from deficiencies, the reason complaints come to you. The first addresses customer satisfaction. You've got to be proactive with the customer. Second, addresses customer dissatisfaction, your reaction to a customer. The first, features, brings in revenue. Deficiencies, if you remove them free from deficiencies, reduce the chronic waste, reduce warranty, litigations, any legal, and it reduces the cycle time, the response time, because there's no correction to be done. You do things faster, better, cheaper. Cost comes down. So when you're embarking on an excellence or quality journey, you start with the second arm first, product, service, features, free from deficiencies. This is not capital intensive. You save money and then you plow it into features, product, service, features. Features do add to the cost. When you work with both, you improve your profit margins and become competitive. There is no reason why India cannot be the healthcare capital of the world. We have the best talent as doctors, surgeons. In fact, they are there in every hospital across the world. Why can't we improve the quality of our processes, make them faster, better, cheaper? We need to benchmark with Bumrungrad Hospital in Bangkok. Thank you. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you. And I think once again, fantastic presentation, sir. And I think every sentence that you said in terms of even learning is applicable to healthcare. And as I see, very often we are not only ignoring, when you say like 0.5%, we are ignoring even higher percentage deficiencies in healthcare. Like I think last time, the lesson was that we need to look at the chronic problems. Here again, right from your example of the banks where they focused on the marble flooring and the Hussein paintings, I think even our hospitals, and I will say probably corporate hospitals, are inviting a problem for themselves by becoming more like hotels. You see, that posh industry looking, hotel looking hospitals, they have two problems. One is, of course, they are putting a pressure on themselves to earn that much more money to justify that kind of infrastructure. And the second is that any person who is walking into that hospital is also coming with a presumption that you are very profitable. While the facts are extremely different, I definitely feel that while we need to emphasize on cleanliness, but I think we should try and remain more onto the simple and hygienic kind of formats to keep the healthcare affordable. I think your example of the infrastructure of those banks to some extent should also be a lesson for the healthcare, which is now trying to become more posh and posh. And as far as the other learning which came from a simple, your question of reconciliation. And I think in the hospitals, from today's lesson, I think if we can focus just on our billing department, we will have a lot of things to learn, as well as probably we will also have answers to the cost of poor quality. Because in the billing department, the amount of rejections that we get from the insurance companies, not necessarily that all rejections are because of the problems at the hospital level. There is an equal problems happening at the insurance level themselves. And also their attitude that how to kind of reject a claim. But then there are genuine problems at the hospital level also. That is at least what we can try to overcome. And also the reconciliation. So many times a patient is pointing out problems in the billing and so on and so forth. So there are huge areas where I think hospitals can learn and can improve our practices. I also invite any of the attendees to ask any question from Mr. Lulla or myself. I have no problem to, so please put it on the chat box. We'll be happy to take any thought process, or if anybody wants to speak, we can even unmute you, and Sakshi can do that part. Just raise your hand, things like that. But I feel that so this talk of yours should go a long way in sensitizing us to not brush things under the carpet. The thing is that let us look at, and I personally feel that the billing department in the hospitals can be a good starting point, as I was listening to you when I was thinking, because that's where at least directly some financial things are being transacted, both for reconciliation as well as people pointing out deficiency of services. So any suggestion or idea that you may have on this thought process, Mr. Lulla?
Any process that interfaces with a customer is a candidate for you. Taking the banking example, you're absolutely right. The billing department can be. But take your, let's pole vault into purchasing. Over 50% of COPQ that comes into an organization is traceable to supplier quality. The purchasing process, the purchase order process is the reverse, where purchasing department is the customer of suppliers. There's a hatchery sitting there, and you would be, if you just address that, you will miraculously see the downstream advantage of checking a problem at source. Billing is important. You don't want to annoy a good experience. Other processes that seem to help from the limited experience I have with hospital is discharge process, and consequently the billing. That is an area to look at. And admissions process. You can unlock capacity by balancing admissions and discharge. So billing is a good starting point. It has high visibility, and I'm sure the insurance companies will also be happier.
The questions, I think, I'm not seeing any. A question would have.
Let me continue.
Yes.
On this bank story.
Sure.
How did we do a dipstick in half a day, 3 hours? All we did was tally the type of errors with the 4 people. Now, where an individual was only making an error, the person needed training. Is that management controllable or operator controllable? Who arranges the training? Management. There are others where randomly everyone was making that specific error. Everyone. That's a systemic error, a process error. Who can correct it? Management. We tend to think that the error and the worker or the operator is one. Not true. Over 80% of problems are management controllable. The processes were defined wrongly. Then the environment of blame comes up and quality suffers further.
Very true. Very true. That this is again a common problem where we tend to be punitive whenever we find out a mistake rather than trying to see the systemic problem or how to improve the system. So I think with that, we had a great chat today, and again, lot of learning, a lot of need for introspection, especially for the healthcare people out here. We'll be very much happy to get your feedback. And what we will very much like is that what you take it away from here is if you can apply even a little bit in your own organization